This is the Power Movement, baby.
Welcome to the Power Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and we are getting back to snowboarding after a pretty long unintentional break. And we're going to jump back into the snowboard world with an absolute legend of the sport, Dale Rehberg. Dale is one of those guys that has the name of a race car driver and the personality of one of the coolest dudes you will ever meet. Bring up Dale to anyone who knows him, and they'll tell you what a rad dude he is. But I had to find this out for myself. And based on this interview, Dale delivers in terms of coming off as an awesome guy. On the show, we talk about the small world that he grew up in, where another legendary snowboarder, Roan Rodgers, was his next-door neighbor, and how he was able to make a snowboard career happen and take it to the top level coming from a small rural town in Wisconsin. Dale is one of the pioneers of the skate style that you see all over snowboarding, and it was an honor to have him on the show. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement, tell your friends about the show, and support my sponsors by drinking some 10 Barrel, chasing it down with some rescue water, all while you're checking out the Evo website with your spy sunglasses on. Those are the brands that make the show happen. Now, let's talk to Dale Rehberg.
What's up?
Not too much, man. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Just hanging.
Well, we've been talking about doing this interview for a while now, but you've been busy because you're a sales rep, and I called you during your busy season. And this podcast, we're going to talk about your life as an athlete. It's also a business episode because while you're a fucking legend in snowboarding, you're also a sales rep, and I haven't had a sales rep on yet. So what brands do you rep?
So I currently do Flow and Nidecker.
Nidecker owns a lot of brands. How many brands are in the Nidecker family?
Yeah, the Nidecker group out of Rolle, Switzerland has 9 brands under their umbrella. So it's Jones, Yes Now, Flow, and Nidecker. And then they recently acquired Rome this summer, as well as Switchback Bindings, Lobster Snowboards, and Battalion. So there's a really nice, diverse group of brands under their umbrella, and it's a killer group. Super sick.
You don't have all those groups in your van, do you?
No, I only do the Flow and Nidecker brands, not all that.
As a rep, do you feel like some of the attention from the corporate side is being diverted from Nidecker when they have all these other brands?
You know, not really. They're really good at running each brand separately and under its own kind of entity. And then the brands are distributed in North America under different distribution channels as well. So the Jones Yes Now brands are distributed out of Nidecker USA, which is in Truckee, California. And then the rest of the brands are distributed out of Low Pressure Studios, which is up in Seattle. They do a great job of keeping everything separated in terms of the brands. And it works out good. Everyone gets the attention that they need. And we're all rolling here. We're moving forward.
Cool. And what's your territory?
I handle the entire West Coast. So with the Flow and Nidecker brands, we run a little bit differently than a lot of other brands. We only have 3 sales reps in the U.S. So I handle the West. A gentleman named Greg Oakley handles the Rockies Midwest, and then a guy named Tim Brennan handles the East Coast. So we have huge territories, which is a challenge to cover at times, but it seems to work out. Just got to be on it and get out there and bust ass.
How many miles do you put on your vehicle each year?
I put on quite a few, but to be honest, the territory is so big, I usually fly around and then get rental cars and do what I got to do in the area where I'm at the time.
So you have status with the airlines?
Shit, I wish.
No. And then how many days are you away from the family being a rep?
It's pretty significant for a few months. I mean, basically the month of November, I'm on the road. And that's clinic season. So you're out seeing who you can and priming them on the selling season that's upon them. And then December's a little mellow, obviously with the holidays in there, and most shops are pretty busy at that time. But then January comes around and you got trade shows and demos start. In February, you're on the road with demos. And March, you're even on the road. So for about 4 months, I'm gone for most of the time.
Oh, man.
I'm out.
And then to be a rep, what I never understood when I was coming up is that there's a ton of investment just to make the year happen. I mean, you have your travel costs, your sales meeting costs, your sample costs. What does it cost you to run your business in a year before you even make a penny? If you don't mind me asking.
You know, every company is set up differently in terms of what you have to pay for out of your pocket. I know there's some brands who have reps that are considered in-house reps, so they're salaried employees. most of the reps that I know are independent. So, for example, I'll get some of my costs covered with samples and things like that, which is a huge chunk. So I get the samples and my demos, use them for the season, and then I return them to the company. So it's not a cost to me, but all travel expenses and shows and things like that are an expense that you eat, and it's part of business, right? So without divulging exactly how much I spent, it's about, call it 15 to 20%, at least of my earnings go to travel.
Some reps will put 20, 30K into samples in the beginning of the year, I feel like, and then they sell them off at the end of the year, but you're in the position where you don't have to do that.
We're fortunate enough with Flo and Nidecker that they understand that cost is so extravagant that it's very hard to recoup that cost. And then you're also selling product into your own account base, which you want to sell the stuff they just bought. So it's an understood economic from the headquarters that, hey, let's work with the reps, make sure that they get out, get on the road, get what they need, and not be burdened with a huge cost. And then when everything gets sent back, the folks at headquarters will figure out where that stuff goes.
And then when you get into the rep business, when you start, you're usually a sub rep and you work for a dude who's the primary rep in a territory. Did you have to deal with that, or were you just given lines based on your experience and potential and who you were?
I was fortunate enough that I didn't have to do the sub repping component. I was with Flow Snowboards for almost 8 years in the marketing side of things. And with my background in snowboarding, when the need for the West Coast rep came up, my sales manager, Kevin Addy, who's a phenomenal dude, he recognized my value and was like, hey, would you be interested in repping? I've worked with reps for many, many years. I understand what it takes. And I looked at the territory. I looked at the dollars being generated, and it made sense. So I didn't have to do the sub rep part. It kind of fell in my lap. But I paid my dues in the industry, obviously, for many, many years that I was able to kind of step in and take charge.
Do you have a crew of people working with you now, or is it with two brands you just need to be yourself?
For the time being, it's just myself. I think I'm probably to a point where I could use a person or a body up in the Pacific Northwest at times and someone in the NorCal area at times. I do have a guy up in NorCal who helps me out. His name's Drew, and he's around when I need him, which is a great help. But I don't really have anyone that I'm paying significantly or giving portions of my earn. At this point, I'm about 1.5 years into the repping component. And as I grow and diversify and I'm trying to add other lines into my repertoire, at that point, then I can start to scale up. If I get brands that need it and need the support, then I can do that. But right now I'm good as I am, and it works out.
It seems like with reps, if you get that one trinket that stores need like 10,000 of and they sell for $2, that's where reps walk with tons of cash and don't have to do any work.
There's guys out there who have some really great brands and do really well. And there's some guys out there with what you say, trinkets, and there's not a ton of work, but they do a great amount of business as well. So it kind of just depends on what the brand is, how it fits into all of your other brands. So they all kind of work with each other, and it's good. But yeah, I'm waiting for the trinket.
All you need is GoPro or someone like that. I don't know if they're still printing money, but
sure.
The one thing that would scare reps, or one thing, there's a few things. I guess you have recession, bad winners, online businesses that you might not get a piece of. But I would think the big scare, and you mentioned it a little earlier, would be brands bringing Salesforce in-house. And I've seen it happen a couple of different times, and it's not that common. Is that something you ever think about, or you don't?
Yeah, man, I think that there's pitfalls in whatever you're doing. Being a rep, you're exposed to those things you're saying. So you're exposed to online direct business. You're exposed to, every one of those things you said, and they are concerns. I think if you're a go-getter and you get out there and you're performing, the numbers don't lie. There's not real reason for companies to switch and move things around if it's working. I do think that in the future, that may not be the case, but from what I see being out on the road and being in shops need to see a person and a body, and they like it. They like to be able to pick the phone up and call someone who will answer the phone immediately. Not to say they can't call customer service, but that person may not necessarily know exact answers that this guy wants. So there's still a tremendous amount of value in being a body that's out there talking to these people. And again, the world's changing the way that we do business and buy and purchase things. For the time being, it seems to be pretty stable. You just cross your fingers and hope that you get with brands that acknowledge that.
Well, that is the exciting part of your life. Now we're going to talk about the rest of it. I think everything starts in Chetek, Wisconsin.
Chetek, Wisconsin. You nailed it.
And when I think of Wisconsin, I think of Wisconsin pride. Everybody is very proud to be from Wisconsin. They have the second best cheese in the country. I think of a playoff game where the Packers should have beat the Seahawks. I was there. They should have gone to the Super Bowl, but they didn't. And then I think about camo hunting, really cold weather, Tommy Bartlett's water ski show, and the Dells. What am I missing that's awesome about Wisconsin?
Hell of a lot of farms, man. You pretty much nailed it. Yeah, I'm from Wisconsin. I'm from northern Wisconsin, a very small rural town of Chautauqua. Not a lot happens there, but there is pride from being from there. And I think when I was younger, I wasn't that proud. I was a little bit different. Obviously, skateboarding, snowboarding, I was doing the water skiing thing. Tommy Bartlett's was something I would see. I was actually in water ski shows growing up, so you nailed that. But for the most part, I kind of wished I was in California, or something like that. I had dreams and aspirations. Now, being the ripe age of 46, I look back and I'm pretty damn proud to be from Wisconsin. I think people that I know from Wisconsin or meet from that area are very nice people, honest, wholehearted people, which I like. And I think that's something to be proud of. But we got a hell of a lot of camo and a lot of hunting going on, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And of course, the Green Bay Packers, they're never going to go away.
Are you a hardcore Packers fan like everyone else?
I was growing up. My father was probably the biggest Green Bay Packer fan in the world. I went to Lambeau Field to the games and grew up doing that. As I grew older and away from it all, I'm not that into that type of sport anymore, so I don't follow it. But when I was a kid, I sure as hell was, that's for sure.
Okay, well, that's one to check off the list, is going to Lambeau Field. Was it a typical childhood, like mom, dad, siblings, white picket fence in the rural hills of Wisconsin?
Yeah, I would say in terms of rural Wisconsin, it was pretty standard. Brother, sister, dog, cat, mom, dad, house on the lake in the middle of nowhere. Lots of bike riding in the summertime and cruising around and shooting BB guns and killing animals that you probably shouldn't be doing, but that's what you do in Wisconsin.
You were a water skier, snow skier, skateboarder, sailor, fisherman.
Yeah.
All sports that take money to get into, so I'm going to assume that life wasn't much of a struggle. Would that be correct?
I would say that for the most part, we definitely were not a fluent family. We struggled. Both my parents worked full time, but they made sure that I was able to do the things that I really wanted to do. So we weren't the mobile home people, but we also weren't living in a mansion on the lake like some.
You were on the lake a lot, it seems like. Water skiing might have been an early passion for you.
Yeah, we grew up on a lake, Prairie Lake, and I got into water skiing. Obviously, my next door neighbor, or very close neighbor, is Roan Rodgers.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, right. And they had a boat and we water skied and got into it. And then Chautauqua had a water ski club called the Hydroflights. They still do. I actually went and watched the show this summer when I was visiting my mother. So I got into the water ski show side of things. And I was doing all that before I even was introduced to snowboarding. I actually blew up my knees water skiing, had 4 knee surgeries before I was 18 from water ski jumping. It's something you do when you're back there, right? In the summers, you get on the lake and you're either fishing or water skiing or tubing or kneeboarding or whatever the hell it is, but you're out there.
And in the shows, did you have girls on your shoulders and doing that kind of stuff?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
That's amazing. I'm going to have to get a picture of that if you have one for promoting the podcast.
I'm trying to look and find that. Actually, I got inspired this summer when I went back and saw the Hydroflight still doing it. And I'm like, God, I wonder if anyone has pictures of when I was doing that shit, but it's hard to find.
It's crazy. I feel like all your major injuries came before you were 18 when you were water skiing, or the ones to your knees. And
yeah.
How are your knees today?
You know, the knees miraculously are great. I'm not sure how, but they're good. No major problems. It was always like a meniscus issue, not ACL, MCL. So I guess I was blessed with that. Yeah, I got that shit out of the way.
But you were having surgery in the 80s.
Oh, yeah. It was kind of primitive, right? I mean, these days you can go in and come out with meniscus repairs quite quickly. I was in a wheelchair my first day of senior high school with double knee surgery to remove my meniscus. But whatever, you just move on. You bite the bullet.
Snow skiing wise, how do you get into getting on snow?
Same scenario. Roan's family, again, they were a really big skiing family, and my family was not.
Was Roan rich?
I don't know if they were rich, but they did better than us. And they were out and about doing their skiing thing, and I tagged along, and I got into it from that. Gosh, we were little kids then, right? And we had 3 ski resorts within 45 minutes of our house. I guess I shouldn't even call them ski resorts. They were ski hills.
Right.
So it was right there, and that's what you did. I mean, it's freaking winter for like 8 months of the year. So you just get out there and you do it, and got really into it and had a great time, man. Still like skiing.
And were you skating at this point too?
Yeah, I guess I was trying to skate. I was super into it. I mean, I had a subscription to Thrasher magazine and my walls were plastered in the prints, but there was one half pipe, like a vert ramp in the next town north of us. It was Rice Lake, where a bunch of the other snowboard dudes that I grew up with were from. So there was some ramps, but we just built like launch ramps and shit, and just do that.
Ghetto stuff that you didn't even know if it was going to work well.
Yeah, exactly. The first little quarter pipe we built had PVC coping. You know what I mean? Like, how long is that going to last? Well, it lasted for a little bit.
It sounds like you find snowboarding around age 13 in the mall.
Yeah, man. So we had a mall in Rice Lake and there was a sporting goods store there. And I think they carried Burton that first year maybe or something. But I was at the mall and this guy had a table set up in the middle of the mall with a video playing and I saw snowboarding. And I was just like, I'm like, I got to do this. It looked so insane, right? It was eye-opening to know that it existed. And then I just got a snowboard, got the subscription to Transworld and Snowboarder and first issues. And dude, you're in, right? Boom. That's the plateau.
Speaking of Transworld and Snowboarder, that's what got you into snowboarding. And I'm going to say Transworld was first, just because they went out of business the other day. And when I say they went out of business, they were shut down. But thoughts and feelings on that, because I'm sure that's a pretty heavy thing to read, that the thing that inspired your whole childhood and career is now gone.
To be honest, I don't think it was a shock to anyone in the world that a print magazine went away. Just the fact of the matter of how things are going. But it was a complete shock just because of what you said. Like, that was everything to me. The later part of the 80s and into the 90s, it was everything, man. You'd sit in school and you'd flip through that mag. You would study it and you knew every person on every page, right? Like, it would be your Instagram today.
Yeah.
It's what you did and saw, and that's how you found out shit. So when I heard that the title was gone, it was shocking, man. It was sad. A lot of great people came out of there. And I think, in the early days, it was really one of the main staples to push the sport and grow the sport. It's where you saw it and got the information from. So when that shit goes away, it hurts a little. It stings, right?
Yeah. And one thing they probably didn't cover was the Midwest contest series that you were a part of back then.
No, they sure weren't there.
I think that's your intro to contests.
Yeah, man. For how small the sport was at that time, the fact that the Midwest, we actually had two series. We had the upper Midwest and then another one that was a little bit south and handled like Illinois and Ohio and shit like that. But the fact that we had that was amazing. That was an outlet to not only go and snowboard, and you did slalom, GS, moguls, halfpipe, right? You did all that shit and your mind was expanding and stuff. But at the same time, you're meeting people that were lifelong friends, and people who went on to become other industry bigwigs and stuff. It was pretty rad, dude, to have that. Even though it wasn't being covered by the magazines, I can say for everyone there at that time, everyone was aspiring to be a professional snowboarder and be in that magazine.
For you at that point, that's when you're putting together your sponsor me kits and sending them out. And that shit works for you. I mean, not too many kids today can put together a sponsor me tape and get sponsored, but you get something to Burton and someone sees it and you end up on the Burton program somehow, right?
Yeah, it was that way. And I don't know if everyone who sent something out got sponsored, but in my case, I did. And I was also winning most of those events at that time and building a name for myself within the Midwest. And there was a group of us, everyone did good, but I was winning the shit, and I think at that time, when you send that into a company, that probably stands out. There was no other way of someone knowing anything unless that was happening.
And do they just send you a big care package of Burton stuff? Is there a phone call? How do you get sponsored at first? Because I would think at that age, you're probably 14, 15 and fired up.
It was initial letter went out and then a letter was received from them and then phone calls happened. And I was talking with Chris Copley at that time. He was, I think, the big Burton team manager then. Our rep in the Midwest at that time was Clark Gundelek, who became a huge industry person, but at that time was the rep. And I don't think he had enough sales generated to support me and Roan, because both of us got sponsored at the same time. So then we went under a gentleman named John Yusko, who was the Colorado rep. So it was just a weird thing. But yeah, you'd talk on the phone and get super excited, and then it would come fall and you'd get the catalog and you'd get to pick out 2 boards and 2 bindings and jackets and pants and shit. It was a dream come true. Wow, this is amazing.
And are there any other sports in your life? Are you doing any team sports? It sounds like your dad's a big football guy. Did he push you towards any of the team stuff?
I was actually a basketball player. I played basketball as a freshman in high school. And funny story, the skater haircut, the Tony Hawk haircut and whatnot, long on one side, short on the other. And you're playing basketball in a freaking pretty much a redneck. You know what I mean? There's dudes with mustaches at 13.
Right.
And the coach, literally at one point, the season was about to start. We're all sitting in the bleachers and he's giving us the talk about the year. And he looks at me and he's like, "Hey, Rehberg, you're going to have to cut the hair above the eyebrows." And I looked at him and I'm like, is this a joke? And I stood up and I'm like, I'm out. And I just walked out and that was it. I came home and I think my dad was pretty bummed, but I can't have someone telling me to cut my hair. And I'm like, all I want to do is go snowboarding and skateboarding. I'm over it. But I had a moment. Yeah, I was definitely into it.
Cool. Well, I'm going to take a real quick break to talk about sponsors. And my first sponsor is Evo, and they've supported the podcast since day one. If you're a fan of the show, I hope you buy your skis, snowboard, bikes, outerwear, everything from Evo. They're the best retail experience in Denver, Seattle, Portland, and Whistler. And their website, evo.com, features the best prices, an amazing user experience, a no-hassle return policy, and free shipping on orders over $50. If you're in store, let them know you listen to the Powell Movement, and you'll get an additional 10% off. My next sponsor is Rescue Water, and each week I tell you how Rescue Water is proactive recovery. But what does that mean to you? Well, think of it like this. If you're really tired, you skip the coffee and grab an energy drink. Well, if you really need to hydrate, like after you get off the hill, finish a workout, or get home from a big night, make the smart choice and drink a cold Rescue Water. It replaces electrolytes much better than your traditional sports drink. It's a difference I can feel every time. It works. Make it work for you by heading over to rescuewater.com, that's RESQ water.com, and save 20% on a 12 or 24-pack case with the code RESQ Water TPM. That's all one word. Rescue Water is also available on Amazon. Those are my sponsors, so we'll get back into it. And high school, you graduate in 1991. I think you're going to Hood at this time.
Yeah.
And you might have gone already a couple times. In 91, you get up there, and I think you meet up with the Joyride crew, and you're already on Burton, and you're with the most established brand in snowboarding. And Joyride somehow lures you away from Burton and gets you to leave Burton. They throw out pro models and money. At this point, Burton's a sure thing. The only thing for you is that you could get lost in the shuffle with a ton of different riders.
That's right.
What does it take for you to leave Burton?
God, I mean, it's really what you said. I met the dudes who were starting Joyride at that time. I don't even think there were boards yet. I think it was just a conversation, but it was that next hope and dream. So being sponsored from like 15, 16, I'm now 18. And I'm with Burton and I'm getting my free boards and boots and bindings and clothing and stuff, and still young, probably not on their radar completely. And these people, it was Tom Nordwall really, who was like, you, to me and Roan, he's like, we want you on our team. And it's like, you start talking and dude, as a kid, you get so excited to hear that. It's like, wait, someone's looking at me and da-da, and you know, you have dreams, and it's just that next step that wasn't happening with Burton at the ripe age of 18, another rider amongst hundreds. And with Joyride, it's brand new and fresh. They don't even have a team. They want you to be the team. That's next level stuff at that point. You're super excited. And I came back from Mount Hood that summer to Wisconsin before I left Breck, and had some phone conversations, talked to my dad, and he just kind of like, you need to figure out what you want to do. If you think that's what you want to do, and you need to pursue it. So moved out to Breckenridge and continued the conversations. And that was end of August or something. So the winter's coming and I'm like, I'm going to do this. I remember having to call John Yusko and have the conversation that I was leaving. And that was it, man. On to the next, right? Joyride was there, and everything that they had said and promised came true and was happening. They were men of their words, and it worked. And that same winter, I got in front of a lot of cameras and things were happening, and it just kind of snowballed at that point.
How long does Joyride last? Because I feel like it's a short run with some influential people.
I think the brand lasted for a pretty long time, but
for you,
yeah, my span was basically a winter and a half. And my reasoning was twofold. One was, okay, I'm showing up in magazines, the magazines that I grew up looking at, I'm seeing myself in. I'm showing up in videos, Mac Dog videos, which I grew up watching. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm becoming what I wanted to become. And the company at that time was still so small. In my mind, I'm like, I should be getting something for all this. Like, I'm showing up in these places and I know the brand is hot. Everywhere you go, people talk about it and love it. But there wasn't anything coming towards me that was actually going to be able to support what I wanted to do. It was very minimal. At the exact same time, you have the bubbling of Ride snowboards. And similar scenario, you get the call, hey, we want you to be on the team. Again, it's the new team. You're going to be the dude. And not only is it all great and fine and dandy, they are throwing money at you. Money where I don't have to do dishes at Pasta J's anymore. Okay, I can go be a snowboarder. And that was the catch. Money talks, unfortunately. It makes you do things. I'm not regretting it, but it worked out great. So Joyride was about a year and a half, and then it went to Ride.
If you talk to Russell Winfield, he will tell you that he single-handedly put the Ride team together. And is that how you remember it happening?
I would say that it's pretty true. I mean, obviously Jason Ford was there, and he was probably having some influence on that as well. But Russell was literally going, Rehberg, you need to do this. Jake, you need to do this. I think Jake was on it before I was. I think it was Jason, Jake, and Russell. And Russell was kind of pioneering it. And I know Jason wanted Roan super bad, and then myself, and then Cersei, and then Mike Kildevall on the racer side. But yeah, he definitely had a lot to do with the way that began.
Your style, it was definitely ahead of its time. It was different. You were one of those dudes that brought more of a skate style to snow. And I mean, you had Roach, Cardiel, Selaznick, and I guess you're in that conversation as well. And in the fashion sense, I feel like you were setting trends as well for a long time. Like in the 90s, you were one of the first dudes rocking really baggy shit and flat-brimmed hats. And that evolved into the Capel days and the fits there. Do you ever look at the influence that you had in the snow fashion as well as the style?
Yeah, and to just say it was me is pinpointing, because there was literally a group of us kind of in this movement. Now, if I rewind the conversation, the thought back, it was like you're watching Mac Dog, New Kids on the Twalk, and you're seeing the riding style starting to become skate. You got Selaznick, Roach, Cardiel, Rankwit, right? All these guys. There's definitely a heavy skate influence in how it's starting to look. Fashion-wise, though, it wasn't the baggy pants look at that point. I remember back to seeing Tarquin Robbins and Quinn Sandvold at an A Basin contest when Roan and I had gone out there. I don't even know what year that was, 91 maybe. Those dudes had that shit going on then, probably a year, 2 years before we started to kind of do that. But then you're also looking at fucked jeans, if you remember that.
Yep.
And like what was going on in skating with World Industries and Big Brother, and the whole skate world was really baggy pants and flat-brimmed hats. And that fit really good into what our style of riding was and kind of our personalities. And when I say our, I'm really saying me, Roan, Nate, and Jake. We all lived together in the house, and that was what our progie was. I mean, dude, at that point, you start to get your individual style, right? So I had the septum ring and fucked up hair and shit like that wasn't really happening back then. And my influences from that were the Christian Fletchers of the world, right? Watching Crusty Demons movies and seeing this guy from San Clemente surfing with his nose. I'm like, dude, that guy's radical. He's like Sean Palmer and surfing. And da-da. So there's all these pieces that you're pulling together to create your own style, which was definitely all new. And it's fun to look back and see how that style just exploded in the industry, and the riding style exploded in the industry, and things happened because of it. It's cool.
You named it you, Nate, Jake, and Roan, the XLG crew.
Yeah, that's it.
What's that name mean?
Extra large. We had XLG, we had NFA, not fucking around. And I think a brand came out shortly after that called NFA. There was a group of us in Colorado, TJ Lize and Dave England and Cody Dresser. Dude, there was a bunch of people that kind of rolled that program, but there was us four. We lived in the Edelweiss, which we call the ghetto, which there was a ton of other people in there as well. We're XLG, right? We wrote that shit on everything, and it was funny. There was all these little groups like that back then. A little group of dudes that named themselves something.
But it's interesting that you guys all seem to move from the Midwest. Are you guys all Midwesterners?
Yeah, like Roan's from my town, and Jake and Nate were both from Madison, so about 6 hours south.
Cheeseheads.
Yeah.
You guys all move out there, and you're about to make jibbing way cooler than it's ever been. And when I say you, I mean I'm saying your era and that crew, but there's more people, as you have mentioned. But you guys are in the streets getting clips that no one's really thought about at that point. Do you get a lot of the influence from just watching skate videos? Like, hey, we're just going to take this to snow?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, when you're not snowboarding at that time, 1991 in Breckenridge, you're watching skate videos or you're playing Skate or Die. That's the influence, 100%.
You have this tight Midwest crew, and from what I know about Midwesterners, they're usually the last ones at the bar, and I attribute that to them having to suffer through the cold of the Midwest winters. Were you guys partying pretty hard too?
Yeah, there was a lot of drinking going on, and dude, we're obviously not old enough to drink at the time. I think we all had fake IDs, and we were just doing it. And like, you'd snowboard all day, you'd come home at night, you'd go get some food, and you'd go ride the rest of the night. And you're having beers, and this is just what we did. Lots of drinking.
Yeah, and while partying might change over time for you, or at least might change with the company that you keep, but from the things I've seen over your career and based on what I know in life, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but you kind of come off as the stereotypical stoner back then.
Yeah, there was definitely some stonage happening for sure. And it just, you're not going to deny it, right? It's just, that was happening for sure. There was a constant reggae vibe happening, and that was it.
And it was illegal back then. Did you ever get in trouble? Because you were the guy that if the cops saw you driving by, they would want to pull you over based on your dreadlocks and probably a big smile.
No, I never got in trouble. Somehow I avoided all situations. I was very elusive.
And was it always weed and booze for you, or did it ever level up?
No, it was pretty much weed and booze, and that was kind of the program. I think everyone experiments with mushrooms and shit at some point in your life, but other than that, there was never any question about how far I was going to take shit personally. That was my deal.
But in your circle, and I don't know if this is something that you saw, but other things did come up, and you probably saw some of your peers getting fucked up on other things than weed and beer.
Yeah.
How is that to deal with as a good friend when you see another friend having a problem like that, and you're, I guess, the only one that could step in and say something, because I wouldn't think anybody else would.
I mean, let's face it, man. As a kid, you're faced with many, many decisions, and your friends aren't always going to do the same thing you do, and you're not always going to do the same thing they do. And I think when I saw some of my friends steering off course of what I would think was okay, I would mention shit every now and then, but I was also not going to stick my neck out and be that guy necessarily. So I just let the course take its path, or let the train take its path, whatever.
I know what you're saying. Around 92 to 94, maybe after The Hard, the Hungry, and Homeless came out, 7th Year and Flying Circus, they also came out around then. And snowboarding had effectively changed. Everything was new. It was raw. You and your crew and some others were in the center of it. But what was the reaction from the industry that was used to a whole bunch of different snowboarding compared to what you were doing?
I think initially the industry was a little bit standoffish, not embracing what was happening completely and kind of writing off the fact that, hey, this is a bunch of Midwest kids. What the hell is this? But I think that that was a really short amount of time before the industry actually started to embrace it and then start to create product that was emulating that product, the fashion of outerwear. I mean, the fact we were wearing fucking jeans, not snowboarding clothes.
Yeah.
Right? Like, things started to emulate what was happening and be embraced. And I think it was rad. And everyone kind of had their own take on it and how it should be. But it took a minute. It wasn't like, oh, cool, here's the new thing. We were kind of the outcasts for sure for a while.
I was like, you guys are the kids, even though you were not super, super young, but you were the children of the industry. And now everything that you've done is what's normal.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I watch stuff with my kids. Like, we'll watch the X Games and you watch the street course, right? And these guys are fucking insane what they're doing. The high-speed handrails into the big kickers and all shit. But I literally was watching it the other day, and I said to my son, I go, look, Dad kind of was the reason that shit's like that. He gets it, I hate to blow my bubble and say that kind of stuff, but there's some truth in it.
For sure.
If it wasn't for Joe Rosbinski and Chad Schnacky cutting off the top of the freestyle ski jumps on Peak 8, the big kicker probably would have never happened, or it would have been a hell of a lot later. If it wasn't for Dave Lee and Todd Schlosser digging those giant runway hits up into the Mount Hood Meadows cornices, the big air shit wouldn't happen. If it wasn't for the late night handrail sessions and then handrails eventually becoming something they put onto a ski resort, it would not be there. A funny story that maybe only told once before is in shop class in 10th grade, I built a handrail and welded these metal V's that went into the snow and put a wood post that you'd use for a fence across it and bolted it down and countersunk them. And I put that fucking thing up on my ski rack, strapped it down, and me and Roan went to Trollhagen, which is now a Midwest kind of staple.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
I set that thing up and we got our ski passes pulled. You know, like it was so new and so freaky. Like this is a time when you couldn't even build jumps without getting your pass pulled. And I'm bringing a handrail up there, but it was that kind of stuff that definitely changed. And that was pre-90. So that stuff changed shit. For the good or the worse, I still think it's great. Everything evolves and I love watching it today.
You do a few years in Colorado and then it's off to Southern California. What sparks that move?
God, at that time, there was a lot of brands down in Southern California. The industry was kind of based down here, you know?
It's so weird that the industry's based there and the mountains aren't.
Yeah, it was a weird thing, but it is what it was. And Jason Ford was down there. And at that time, Russell was like, hey, I'm moving to SoCal. Jake's like, I'm moving to SoCal. My friend Matt Smith, I'm moving to SoCal. And I was in Breck with the other guys. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go down there and check it out. I'm not committing that I'm going to move there, but I want to see it and never had been. And let's go. I loved it. And I'm like, this is awesome. And at that time with Ride Snowboards, we had the support to travel basically whenever we wanted to go somewhere. So I didn't necessarily have to be at a mountain to be snowboarding. I still snowboarded over 200 days a year.
Wow.
But when I was home, I could be at the beach or just chilling down in the warmth. So it was a cool attraction. And I ended up moving there and kind of stayed there for a while.
All the magazines are there, so there's a lot of relationships that can be built that'll get you exposure as well.
Sure, exactly.
I talked to Rankwit about it, and he seemed like when he would sit down and talk to the people at the magazines, he would tell them what idiots they were and how they didn't know how to run a fucking magazine. But it didn't seem to work well for him. But in terms of getting exposure for you, were you smart enough to build those relationships and create exposure? Or were you just kind of living in the moment, and if it happened, it happened?
Yeah, I think the latter part of your sentence. I think I would visit the magazines. I knew John Foster. I knew Kevin Kinnear. I knew Fran Richards just from being out in snowboarding. So when I would go into the mags, it was a, hey, how you doing? And again, I wasn't trying to change the world. And I think that the fact that I was there made it easy for them to go, oh, we got a trip coming up. Who should we take? Oh, yeah, Dale's down here. Let's get him on a trip or whatever. And then with the snowboarder crew, it was Doug Palladini and a bunch of those cats over there. And it was just kind of natural. And I definitely understand Mike's angle. You know, I traveled with him for years of my life and we were very close. And that's that dude, right? He's going to tell you what he thinks. I wasn't that guy, so I didn't want to ruffle feathers.
I would think you were always the voice of reason. If you're traveling with Russell and Rankwit, I would think you're the one who's trying to keep people in check so you don't feel like an idiot.
I'd say for the most part, yeah, or you just walk away, right?
Yeah.
Like one or the other. But I didn't really ruffle feathers. I didn't really have opinions. And again, I was very young and naive and I didn't know what it should be, right? I just thought that everything was fucking awesome. So I'm like, this is killer.
In those ride days you mentioned, you kind of had an unlimited travel budget, which is pretty amazing. People don't have that these days. Ride was really good to you guys. But do you ever look back at your career and wonder what would have happened if I stayed on Burton?
I don't, man. I'm pretty much the guy that just, I look forward. I don't look backwards. I don't have any regrets. And I think that if I was to play that scenario out in my head, it could have been a similar scenario. It probably just would have took longer. But no, I really don't look back and say, what if? I just fucking did what I did. And I mean, there's always things where I look back and I'm like, God, that could have been cool or whatever, but I'm not analyzing it and thinking about it.
When you were with Ride, were you involved in the product or are you purely a horse?
No, man, they were so all about the team involvement. It's so awesome that I have that in me. Never have gone to college, never had a degree, never understood a lot of things, but being able to sit in meetings and conceptualize ideas and just the craziest shit you could think of, put it out on the table and see what works and then seeing it all come to life, right? Because of the people in the company working hard to make your ideas happen. Ride was so 100% about listening to the team, which I think is just so, so valuable to how that brand got to where it was. Tim Pogue was brilliant about listening and all the other people in there. So we were hands-on, whether it was snowboards, graphics, marketing, direction, all that shit.
Who was responsible for the flat kick shapes in the early ride lines?
Pretty much Russell and myself. I think Joyride had came out with a flat kick board sometime, probably that 92 winter. And the concept had been done by them. I think it was a board with the Grinch on it or some shit, but taking the concept and then being so into skating, looking at skateboard shapes and how they're kicked, it's just like, God, what if a snowboard looked like that? How fucking cool would that be? And then having a company actually embrace the idea and fucking go for it, that's pretty rad. And then it happens and you're like, okay, they maybe weren't the greatest, but it was definitely something different and wasn't happening. And it became kind of an iconic thing.
It's a shape that's remembered, and it was different than everything that was coming out at the time. Now I'm going to take a final sponsor break, and my next sponsor is Spy Optic. And Spy is an independent Southern California optics company that has defined what style looks like in the sunglass and goggle world since 1994. They are a fun-loving family of athletes and artists who create the best products on the market. This year, the Spy team developed what is arguably the best goggle ever made, the Ace EC. It features electrochromic one-lens technology, which means you have 3 different lenses built in your goggle and you can change them with the push of a button. It's so game-changing that I can't offer you a special discount on this amazing goggle, but what I can do is offer you 20% off anything else on spyoptic.com. To get that discount, head on over to spyoptic.com, enter the code TPM, the number 20, that's all one word, and you will get 20% off. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They have been brewing the Northwest's best beer since 2006, and they encourage everyone to go drink some of their beer outside. Why? Because 10 Barrel is all about the outside. They live and breathe the snow and bike lifestyle and support it with events, like the final 2 Hella Big Air events of the season. The next one is coming up at Mount Bachelor on March 30th, and I'll be on the mic. The final stop is April 6th at Sierra at Tahoe. If you're anywhere near, these are events you are not going to want to miss. Next time you're at the store, pick up some 10 Barrel. To find out more about the beer that supports action sports, the events, and their pubs, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors, and now we'll get back into the podcast. You were on Twist Clothing as well, but that comes to an end with the beginning of a ride-back brand called Capel.
Yeah.
Are you a founder of Capel? Are you one of the reasons that happens?
Yeah, I mean, I remember being at the Pogue's house in Issaquah and having a discussion that Ride wanted to have a clothing line. And I think they were debating whether it was going to be Ride clothing, like, you know, how Burton had Burton clothing, Burton, or if they were going to create a spin-off brand. And we started conceptualizing spin-off brands and what that would look like and talking about it. And Capel, the name, came out of my mouth at some point and it stuck. I think the original logo I drew when I was at home in Wisconsin, it looks a lot like the Colorado Sea, which I didn't even know what a Colorado Sea was at that time. But we would go to New Zealand and we saw the Canterbury, like all the rugby dudes. There were so many different influences for that brand that came together. But yeah, that was brainstorming with 5 people from the company and boom, now there's a brand, you know, and we're like, what do we want to do for ads? And I'm like, let's do hot chicks. No one's doing that. I think that's awesome, you know, and going and picking out girls from the model agency with John Foster and just craziness, but really killer and way different.
Are you involved with the fits and the looks of the clothing?
The first year I was. The blue jacket with the white V, the gloves with the dots on the knuckles, the pants, they're all chino pants. That first year I was very involved, and then it kind of got away. They hired people to do it, and this girl named Lisa was super good. So you'd go in and talk and stuff, but then you just let them do it. A lot of times it would come out you didn't like it, but there'd be the pieces that you did like, and you just settle.
At the peak of your career, who's paying you? I mean, you've got Ride, you've got Capel, but do you have like a sunglass? Do you have a shoe? Are there a ton of sponsors?
I was Ride and Capel, being treated as 2 separate brands. I had Arnett at the time. I think Scott may have came and Scott and replaced Arnett at one point. There was some other littler things around, but at that point, that was kind of the staple.
Did you feel not cool when you got on Scott? Were you like, all my brands are pretty core and now I'm getting on Scott?
Yeah, I felt pretty not cool. I think I only rode their shit for like a couple months. I was not that hyped.
Okay.
There was a point too, though, when Capel stopped, or I stopped with Capel and started to ride for Dub. Because being in San Diego for those years, I knew Ken Block and Damon Way, because they had drawers and 8-ball. And that was the San Diego brand, right? And that was the skate shit that we wanted to be part of. And when they came out with Dub, that was something that I always aspired to be part of, and then got on that. And then I was super stoked to be involved with that group of people, because that was pretty much the shit for a few years in snowboarding in terms of outerwear. But yeah, just kind of moved around a little bit at a certain point.
And how does the snowboard career end? Is it just your contract ends? You don't want to go out and get another deal? What happens?
A lot of things were happening. So snowboarding.
We're about 98?
We're 99.
Okay.
98, 99-ish. The snowboard industry had peaked. It was huge. It was kind of going through weird times. Ride at that time had exploded as a public company and became this massive thing. And all of a sudden that had a downturn. There were a lot of internal changes at the company, talk of purchases by other brands, and it wasn't going good for the company. And myself being 28, I'm watching the videos and I'm like, look, I'm not keeping up with these young kids. They're so much further. Okay, I'm going to try the big mountain side of things. And I did Alaska a couple times and scared the shit out of myself. And I'm like, that's definitely not where I want to be. And it all kind of came to a head. The Olympics were coming up. Ride hired Jeff Brushy away from Burton.
Yep.
So that was probably a huge price tag for them. My contract came up, and at that time, Tim Pogue was not the person I was dealing with. I was dealing with some marketing chick. I don't even know who she was. There was a dude from dog food company in there as fucked up shit. And they're just like, you're done. There's no new contract. It wasn't even a negotiation of, hey, do you want to just ride for us for pride? It was just, you're fucking out. And I had a moment where I was like, okay, this is over. I saw it coming. The writing's been on the wall. But do I want to go pick the phone up and start calling other people and put my name out there? And I feel like that's groveling somewhat. I mean, it's what I did when I was a little kid to get sponsored, but it wasn't what I wanted to do as a 28-year-old guy. I'm like, dude, I need to figure out what I'm going to do in my life. How many more years can I do this? And the industry was hurting, and it just kind of was a perfect storm to just move on. Like, fuck, I'm cool with it. Let's go figure out something else.
So there's no bitterness at all? You're just ready to go?
There was no bitterness, dude. I mean, like I said, I just cruise. I take what's handed to me and I make the best out of it. I was not bitter. There was nothing I could be bitter about. They were fucking failing as a company. They couldn't afford it and they didn't want me there. And I don't want to be somewhere where you're not wanted. And I'm like, let's figure this out. What's next?
And are you left with anything after snowboarding, or are you kind of living in the moment and spending all your funds? I mean, do you have to get a job right after you're done your career?
No, I had saved some money. I was good for a while and I owned a house and I was good. And I'm like, okay, I had time to think about it. I didn't necessarily know what I was going to do or how to do it, but at least I had time to think about what I wanted to try to do. I'm like, okay, I know the industry. There's some brands right here locally. I was living in Bellevue, Washington at the time. There's some companies, a lot of companies up there. So I ended up going over to this company that some of my friends were at and starting there from the ground up.
2000, you worked for Silence and Avalanche and M3?
Yep. At like 99, 2000. Yep. It was Silence and Avalanche, Neptune, wakeboard, straight line water ski ropes. They were kind of all under this umbrella in Redmond, Washington.
Well, that's perfect for you with the water background as well. It's like you fit right in.
It was perfect. So I jumped in there, started in the warehouse, worked my way up into marketing. And then I was going to Florida to deal with wakeboarders and coming up with new types of Spectre rope and handles for wakeboarding. So it fell into some of my background. It was an easy transition. But at the same time, I'm still doing snowboarding too. So it worked out and it was good. I learned a lot.
I can imagine when you get into your office job, when you get out of the warehouse, you get up into an office, and I mean, really in your life, you've probably only had to answer emails, and email wasn't even that huge back at the end of your career. So you get into this office and you have to figure out spreadsheets, PowerPoints, and a whole learning process that you've never had to do before. Is that a challenge that's fun to you, or is it a total hassle?
No, it was a challenge. It was fun to me. I remember literally the first time I had to use Excel. I was just like, right? What the hell is this, man? And this guy, Mark Larson, who funny or not, is Steph Pogue's brother. He worked in the same company. He's showing me how to use Excel. You embrace it, right? It's like, this is what people are doing out there, right? I need to learn it. And it was fun. It was awesome.
That job lasts for about 4 years. I don't think those brands are around anymore. Did you go down with the ship, or is it something that after you left,
Yeah, it was, the whole company was in a very challenging time, and they had hired a consultant to come in to restructure the business. So I'm learning all this, talking to this guy and whatever. That guy ends up taking Silence and Avalanche away from the company. And he was from San Clemente, California. And he's like, hey, I'm going to move these snowboard brands down to San Clemente, California. Would you want to move down with it and continue doing the marketing and team and overseeing the product line and all that? And at that time, it was myself, my girlfriend, she was working there. And then the sales manager is BK Norman, a good buddy of mine. So all three of us moved to San Clemente, worked down here. And the guy ran it for, I would say it was about 3 years. And then it just completely dried up. The industry dried up. The Japanese business was gone. Just things weren't working. And then at that point, it went away. And then I went on to the next, which was Alliance Clothing.
So you had Alliance, then you did NXTZ, or I don't know if it's N.
Yep. Nextease. Yeah. Yeah. Flow.
Oh, is that Flow? Nextease?
Yep. That was their brand.
Okay. Because that's what I was going to say. Then you're on to Flow, which to me is an interesting one because I think Flow came out around the first wave of step-ins in the late 90s, and they were the only ones to really weather that storm and are still around today.
Yeah.
Back when they first came out, did you ride step-ins or any alternative binding systems?
No. I remember being in Las Vegas at the trade show when it used to be there and seeing Flow and just kind of laughing about it. It's a weird thing, right? I mean, it's definitely something different. And at that time, the shit was pretty archaic looking compared to what you had. So I remember that, and it was always kind of this brand that had a stigma with it and all that. So when it came down to the point I'm now working in the Flow offices with the Flow people and the Flow product, it took me a minute to accept it, because I was dealing with Nextease, which was an accessory component to the company. I didn't deal directly with Flow at that point, but I was being educated about it. And the product was so much further than obviously what I had ever remembered, and I'd never ridden it. And I got in there and my mind was changed. I'm like, okay, this is not that corny. This shit's actually really killer. And I started to dabble in their marketing conversations and dealings with, direction and things like that. And it all kind of came together. Nextease went under the Flow umbrella as an accessory, just a Flow accessory. And then I was working with Flow.
So you do Flow for 8 years?
Yeah, I was there for, until, what year is it right now? 19 till 16. So 8 years pretty much.
You leave Flow, they're still in a good place, and it's time for you to graduate to something else. I think you start your own businesses for a little bit, TH&R and I9 Media.
Yeah, so what happened was, this is the irony of never burning bridges, right? Is Nidecker came to the Flow offices, and over a few months' time, they acquire the brand. So Nidecker bought Flow. At that point, Flow no longer exists as a company here. It's based out of Rolais, Switzerland. So all of our jobs are eliminated. Everyone's gone.
Whoa.
Again, no hard feelings because they have the shit covered over there. They don't need us, right? And I think there were talks about how could I be incorporated, and there wasn't room or it didn't work out. No good or bad either way, right? That's when I started to work with I9 Media, which is the digital marketing agency that I had hired 4 years previous. So that was a great transition into that. And then, yeah, you mentioned TH&R Collective. That's my wife's and my candle company that we had started and dabble around in. And it's got some legs now. So there was all these other components kind of moving with digital marketing and a candle brand and things like that. And then about 6 months after the acquisition that Nidecker purchased Flow, I received a call from Kevin Addy, who's our sales manager, letting me know that their longtime rep for the West Coast had left and they were looking to fill that position. And that leads me to where I am today.
Wow, that's an amazing circle of events there.
Yeah, it is.
So don't burn any bridges.
Don't burn bridges. You never know.
Before I get into the last part of the show, I want to know what you like least about Russell Winfield.
I don't like anything least about Russell Winfield. I love everything about the guy. As loud as he is, as blatant as he is, as straightforward as, I love every part of it.
Okay, well, I only asked that because my last section of my show is called Inappropriate Questions. And I talked to Russell, and he came up with 3 inappropriate questions for you. So if you had something to say, that was the time to say it. You missed your window. I'm going to jump into Russell's first inappropriate question.
All right, let's do it.
Question number 1. Dale Regularberg. Have you ever been without clothing in public? And if so, where and what were the circumstances?
Well, there was a moment, which I think Russell's referring to, in a little bar called the Rodeo Bar in La Alpes, France. And there was an event there every year in October called the La Mondiale, which is their kickoff to the winter. And me and Russell liked to drink back then a lot. And we befriended the bartender in that bar to the point where we could pour our own drinks and we had run of the mill in the bar.
Nice.
And there was an evening when we were rather hydrated. And there was a couple, an elderly French couple, sitting at a bar table. And they said something to me. And picture this time, I think I had a shaved head, bleached blonde hair with a septum ring, and probably quite loud. And I believe I jumped up on their table, pulled my pants down, smacked my ass, and told them I was Satan. In the middle of the bar. And it led to a very fun evening.
That is amazing. That is one to tell the kids.
Yeah, they love that story.
All right, I'm going to go to question number 2.
Okay.
Question number 2. Dale Regularberg. We all know, after an evening of drinking, that we get hungry. What is the weirdest thing that you have ever eaten or ate after an evening of libations?
Another inside joke, I think, that we are going to hear about.
Yeah, you do build up quite a hunger when you're drinking, as we all know.
Yes.
This story also happened in La Alpes, probably a different time, maybe the same year, but probably a different year. We were very hungry, and it was probably 3 a.m. And back then in France, at about 4 o'clock or maybe 5 o'clock, you hear every door slam in that country. Everything shuts down. So you're starving, you're in a mountain ski town, there's nothing to eat. Well, we went into our distributor's room that evening and proceeded to crawl into their kitchen and open their refrigerator to see what they had in there to eat. And they had this really killer sausage, like a big European style sausage. And we just ate the shit out of that thing, right? It's super salty, you're eating it. Well, we come to find out the next day that someone had broke into our distributor's room and ate all the dog food. So that was what we chowed down on in the middle of the evening. Dog sausage.
That is so funny. All right, I'm going to go into Russell's final question.
Where's the weirdest place you've ever woken up, and who was it next to? In Austria.
In Austria? God, I don't think I even remember. If I had to be honest, it was probably waking up next to him.
In Austria?
In Austria.
Clothed?
Yeah, clothed. No, I'm trying to think what he's referring to, but I just can't. I don't even, yeah.
Well, that is the sign of a good life, I feel like. If some of those memories you can't remember, they must have been very fun.
Yeah, there's a few of those for sure. That's funny shit.
Well, I want to thank you for your time. You're a pioneer of the snowboard world, now a sales rep. You've never left the industry. You've probably got 35 years in the snowboard biz, hopefully another 35 years to come, and I want to thank you for everything, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, dude. I appreciate it. Your stuff is great. I love listening to it. Keep up the good work.
So that was time with Dale Rehberg, and he is as chill as it gets. I mean, his snowboard career ends, and he doesn't sweat it. He just figures he'll go on to whatever's next. He gets laid off from his job. He doesn't sweat it. He goes with the flow, and by being a cool person and never burning any of the bridges in his life, he was able to have the company that laid him off call him back and offer him a different position. Not too many people are like that in the world today, and maybe we should all be a little more like Dale. When bad shit happens, just say fuck it, dude, and keep moving on. So the takeaway from the show this week is something that we all should have learned at an early age. Don't burn any bridges. As always, I want to thank you for listening to the show and ask you to review me on whatever platform you listen to me on. Judging from the reviews, you are not doing this, but it really helps and it only takes a minute. Finally, please support my sponsors who make this show happen. They are Evo, Rescue Water, the 10 Barrel Brewery, and Spy Optic. Have a great week, everyone.